No shit, man. Let's do this.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
So, welcome to Brain VR podcast. I'm sitting here with Ethan. Ethan, can you introduce yourself to our audience and what do you actually do?
Yeah. So, my name is Ethan Kobayashi-hsieh. I'm an actor trainer. I'm a practice researcher, and I'm a life coach. I also am the artistic director of 5 to Midnight International. That's where I do my professional work, and I train actors and I run practice-based research workshops and cultural events and community events across Asia. And so, as a collective, we've developed a performance practice called the Integrative Approach and Method of Active Transformation, collectively known as TIAMAT. And so this has been the product of about like 5 or 6 years, coming up to 6 years of research now. And it's rooted in performance, both traditional and contemporary practices, mostly from the Asian tradition. But thanks to the work of John Vervaeke, it seems likely that there's a good deal of plausibility that this practice could be more than just for actors. It also has possible applications towards wisdom cultivation. And so I think that's kind of the leg of the research that I'm on at the moment, where I'm trying to not just keep it contained within like, does it make you a better actor, but does it make you a better person? And can you use it in that way? So that's kind of where my research is at the moment.
You know, I'm always really interested in the personal kind of experiences and stories. So what were your experiences and maybe some key moments that affected your way and what led you to where you are right now and what you are, researching and developing?
Yeah. So like I went to drama school when I was younger. This was about I think it was about 20 something. I went to drama school in London, and I talk about this a little bit on my own podcast called Minutes to Midnight. You can find it on the 5 to Midnight YouTube channel. But I was in drama school, and I recognized that there was a lack of how do I say this? Well, okay, maybe I can talk about it from a psychological principle. So there was a lack of coherence, significance, and purpose in what I was doing there. Right, I didn't have a sense of how things were fitting together. That's the coherence aspect. It didn't really give me a sense that I was becoming more me, or that I was leaving things behind. I wasn't experiencing that disillusionment, which comes with a kind of insight of like, oh wow, so that's a significant section. And I also didn't really understand why I was doing that, because I was being taught to perform in a way that was for a particular audience segment, which is the British audience. I have criticisms about that, but I also wasn't getting the sense that like, well, that's what I want to do, because it was never my plan. It was never my plan to really like be an actor in Britain. I wanted to get the skills, make my own work, possibly back in Singapore, like this half of the world. So it didn't seem very fitting. And so I had a kind of like anagogic episode when I left the school for a summer break. And then when I came back, I was like, okay, no, actually, I want to research all of the things that I'm not being taught, which seem to have been barred for me. So I did my own kind of independent research and experiments, so just playing around. But that kind of like triggered this question of like, is there something, and this is a very problematic statement, but is there a general practice of acting? Which you can't really say because it has to be contextualized but still, that was an important question to drive. The answer is no, I think. but there are certain like cognitive mechanics which exist, as human beings, which I've managed to build as pillars around the method. And then that's where I'm experimenting now, because it seems to have benefits in terms of making us more rational, and moving towards this thing that we can call wisdom.
Is it right to say that it feels like the kind of educational system on many different levels, but also in many different kind of topics, it feels like it's contained in this frame of reference, and it's only inside of it, and people don't really go between the frame and life, it feels kind of rigid. And it's what I and my colleague here on our show and our biology studies on Charles University felt as well. We felt like, okay, it's very different from acting, but also it's similar in some ways, because there is so many things that you can transfer from the frame. And those lecturers and professors, they were kind of locked into the frame, and they couldn't see, okay, for example, really like example that will explain that. We were learning about physiology of stress. And basically every student is stressed before an exam. And they didn't say, like, they were talking, okay, you can affect stress by breath and da-da-da-da. They didn't say a word about how to use our breath to actually calm ourselves down. And it's so easy. It could have been one sentence. And people were like, I want this, I need this, and they didn't do it. So does it feel similar that there wasn't the transfer between the frames and the life? Is it? Do I understand it correctly?
Yeah, I think you're getting the main gist of it, which is that there has to be some kind of bridge from the theoretical into the practical. Because that's when it starts to become enacted and starts to change our experience of life. And I think you've actually pointed it out quite clearly what was happening with me. It was like I was learning like tricks of the trade in a way, which is that it works in a certain context. And if that context is just purely theoretical, it's like, then it kind of doesn't work. But it's totally different to have those things move from just being tricks within a certain context and being able to accept them into other situations in daily life. So let's talk, like, say, okay, this physiology of stress thing, right? It's like you could go to you go to the self-help section in a bookstore, for example, and you go pick up a book on like pranayama, for example. And it's very simple actually. You just look at online. Like if you breathe and you keep the exhale, you extend the exhale longer than the inhale, it actually calms your parasympathetic nervous system down. And it's like that, like, as you said, it took one sentence. Yes. So why is that thing missing?
I know, right?
Yeah. So I think but it points at, I think, a meta problem which John has articulated quite a lot, is that we exist in a propositional tyranny. Right. And so the propositional tyranny indicates that, like, it's easy to feel like we get sucked into the belief of the theory around something, and is not actually changing the enacted, embodied experience of life, which fundamentally is where acting sits. So you can see how, for me, that was really quite like a loop. But I also have brought up to John that the opposite of that problem is a procedural tyranny, where it just becomes, I don't want to know what the problem is. I don't want to know the mechanics of it. Just tell me what to do to fix the thing, And then that's where we get the atrocities of the 20th century, where it becomes like, I just have these programmed habits which I seem to know are good for me, but then there's nothing beneath that. So my proposition, I suppose, here with TIAMAT is that there has to be a way to enact both of them together in a singularity. And I think that's kind of why I'm interested being here, actually, because it might help us to get there, like, closer between the two of us. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh my God, that's so cool. It feels like to be on different levels at the same time and not to lock into some level that we find comfortable, maybe. So whenever you find something that fits your world, you're gonna latch into that and lock into it. And it feels the same way as with propositional tyranny. And this is really, like, for me, that's kind of insight with the procedural tyranny as well, where you just get the program and you just do it mindlessly, basically, and you don't connect it to the proposition, and you don't connect it down there to the perspectival knowing and participatory knowing as well. Okay, so right now I think people who don't know you don't have any idea what is it that you do actually. What is the practice? What is the TIAMAT? How does it work, and what do you do there?
Oh, I used to call it like I make people do weird things.
Yeah.
Okay, so all right, so as a brief overview of TIAMAT, like TIAMAT is based around four primary cognitive mechanics. So there's metacognition, which is I used to call it this. We used to think about it as like thinking about your thinking. It's not as simple as that. There's some really wonderful work being done by like Joseph Perner and Joel Prue and kind of around that argument. But metacognition is I think a better way to think about it is knowing what one knows or knowing what one doesn't know. And then we have interoception or introception, depending on which part of the world you're from. And that's the ability to sense the viscera of what's happening inside the body. And that's a lot of information that we tend to ignore. And then we have transjective rationality, which is the ability to swap between perspectives. This is largely the contribution of John and Guy Sangstock and circling and authentic relating, but it's the ability to swap between your subjective and objective perspectives and then build upon those to further rationalize, to improve one's ability to take on different perspectives and operate in life. And then we have the active imagination component, which is Jung's contribution. He used to, but that's where we start to experiment with developing cognitive structures that are deeply, deeply personal. And we dive into fantasy and dreams and free association in order to shape cognition. So it's not so much about just these four, but it's how they layer together. That is, for me, I think the key important point. It's like once they start to layer together and build upon each other, then we start to arrive at something that allows us to de-automatize our cognition. Mm-hmm. And so I like to think of TIAMAT as ways of sharpening the tools. These are just 4 tools in our cognition. And then if you want to use those tools to make a chair, or to build a boat or build a house, like at least you know that those tools are sharp enough to get you there.
I mean, I was impressed by the practice and how when you were talking with John, you were exploring how deep it is actually. I love how how from some principles that you explore and that you research and that you learn about, you are developing something that is encompassing like all of them together and is a tool for personal transformation, for personal growth, and kind of getting to wisdom, and then I think to meaning as well. I think the TIAMAT is very much based on the body and embodied cognition as well. What are like? How would one imagine what you do there? Like, can you say a little bit about what are the specific practices what you do there actually, as like animal forms and other things that you do?
Oh, yes. Okay, so when we come down to, so that was the theory part that I just articulated. Thank you for bringing up the physical aspect of it. So we use the body as a means of entering, for the most part, as a means of entering into a relationship between the mind and the body. So when we talk about, say, one of our exercises like animal forms, they are, in the beginning at least, at its most basic set of choreographed, you call them animal flow movements. They're also inspired by yoga and Tai Chi. But as they start to get more and more complex, they're designed to leave room for improvisation, for exploration, but it's very much grounded in the idea that you can do the activity while at the same time observing yourself doing the activity, and therefore can make changes to your execution of that activity, and then get some understanding of it. And this is something that runs throughout a lot of our exercises, whether it's things like push hands, or we do a form of Lectio Divina, which is a way of reading text, but we do it physically, right? And we call it Actio Divina. So it's how do you embody what is being evoked in you from the text, you know? And sometimes that's abstract, sometimes that's literal. But I think it's important to be able to try and enact that cognition for transformation.
Okay, this is this one, Actio Divina. That was so amazing.
You tried this, didn't you?
Yeah. I was just, it was amazing. Like, so first of all, like it feels like for a human being that doesn't have any experience with this, it's like, okay, if you were in acting school, if you did some part of like movement practice or something, you are fairly connected to your body. So you know how to maybe move a little bit, and you are fairly connected between your body and mind. So, but I think like for most people, I think it's really hard, and we kind of are, it feels like we are kind of losing connection between our body and mind. And I think as John, like I was just thinking about this now, as John has the remembering, including yourself into the world again and realizing you are part of it, the same way I think we can remember the lost connection with our bodies, and we can include our body and mind together and the world together. And so that's I'm getting to a point, but this is going to be my next question. But the thing is, what I try to develop now, and what I try to cultivate, is the exact like connection and this sensation of my body, which is not, it's not really, so it's not rough. You have to be very sensitive. You have to be very sensitive to feel things that otherwise you wouldn't feel. Otherwise it would get cluttered in the noise, and you need to kind of find a signal, it feels like. And it's about practice, it's about cultivation, it's about the time and focus that you put into it. And I was looking at your talk with John, and I suddenly, I had thoughts, but I couldn't really write them down. I couldn't really grasp them. So what I did was like, oh my God, they're just talking about it now. Why don't I do it? So I just stopped it, and I went and moved. I just went here into this room, and I was like, because like, yeah, I was like basically not writing, but how do you say? Well, painting with my body in the air, like things that I felt. Yeah. And the hardest part, okay, so the hardest part for me, and I think for many people, it's how like you try to grasp it and kind of frame it, but you don't know what's right, you don't know what's wrong, and there is nothing right and nothing wrong. You just do something, and it doesn't have to be right, it doesn't have to be pretty, it doesn't have to, it doesn't have to be anything. And it's so hard to get rid of this framing, like it needs to look like something, and it needs to have a form. No, like let it go and do anything like that feels like that you feel like doing. And it's so hard to like let this go and just explore the space. So that was my experience with it. And yeah, my question now is like, okay, how do I actually cultivate and remember the lost connection with the body, and include my body in maybe in daily life also, but also how to practically, like how to start doing this when I know the start is just, okay, just go there and like do it, but it's hard for people. It's hard for people to just go and like they don't like.
Okay.
People don't know.
Okay, Wojtek. So I want to, because I think where we can access this is you had mentioned something earlier which really struck me, and it's still with me. This sense of trying to feel things and sort out the noise. right? Trying to listen to things and sort out the noise, or it's trying to get that signal to noise ratio, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm kind of curious, like while you were trying out Axio, I mean, obviously I wasn't there to facilitate, so I don't know. But what do you mean by things and noise? Like how do you find the distinction between those things?
It feels like sometimes there's like too much, like not like, I don't know, not roughness, but like too much pressure on doing something, rather than calming myself down and feeling this like sensation which isn't really that strong, but it feels like the signal, right? So I could do like all kinds of things, right? Like I can do like whatever, but then it feels different when I calm myself down. I maybe, you know, slow my breath down. I maybe like kind of have a meditative state in the movement, and I do. I feel different, and I'm becoming like metacognitive. I'm becoming. It feels like meditation. It feels like meditation. So I'm becoming like not inside it, but I have the metacognitive aspect of it. So this is for me the difference, and it's a lot about like meditative state and calming myself down before it or throughout it. So does that make any sense?
Yes, it does. And this is like, because now we're basically in a kind of a facilitative relationship here. I'm basically enacting with you what I would do in like a one-on-one class with TIAMAT, right? So now, if you're engaging in an exercise, right, whether you're engaging in animal form or engaging in Lexio or Axio or whatever, what tends to emerge out of that is one of two kinds of imagery. We get perceptual imagery or we get recalled imagery, and usually it's actually a mixture of both. And so, perceptual imagery is anything that is generated as a result of your perceptions. And so these come in the form of like, you have proprioceptive imagery. So, you know, if you move your hand in a particular way, it has to do with the external body. There's interoceptive imagery, which is the feeling of the viscera, right? Some people feel like, oh, you know, when I do this gesture, like my chest tends to close, you know, my chest starts to feel heavy, or I start to feel like water in my gut or something like that. And then there is exteroceptive imagery, which is literally the things that you're seeing in your external world. And this is coming out of Damasio's work. Specifically from Descartes' era. And then you have the other side, which is recalled imagery, which has to do with your memory bank, literally, or your experience. And so neither of these two things, at least within our practice here, is like none of those are signal or noise. They're just, it's one. Yeah. You see, it has to be one. And this is where my criticism of Descartes comes in. I think I don't necessarily disagree with the Cartesian model in the same way. Maybe an unpopular opinion, but like, I don't think that the mind and body are one. I think they are very much are separate things. Where Descartes went wrong is putting them on a hierarchy, as opposed to placing them in a lateral dynamic relationship. And so when we're trying to reclaim this sense of what is being embodied, it's first accepting that these two kinds of imagery, the perceptual and the recalled imagery, are actually together. They very much form the totality of the experience. If we remove one of them, then the loop is broken, right? So the second, that's the first thing that needs to be corrected. I think the second thing is also this idea that imagery is only visual. Again, something we inherited from the Cartesian model. I'm aphantasic, so I don't see.
Me too.
Things visually. Yeah, and it's fucking difficult, mate. It's like fucking difficult to have aphantasia because we live in such a visual culture, and it's like, man, you know, if you can't see this stuff, it's like, what's wrong with your brain? Nothing actually. Images, especially perceptual images, are not always visual. They are sometimes auditory, they're also tactile, and they can be felt. Like, I can't bloody imagine a lake in front of me, but damn, I can feel wind, you know, at like the drop of a hat if I wanted to, you know. So it's kind of understanding, if we take the idea of self-knowledge to be knowing how one have to get a sense of how your imagination operates for you. You know, what kind of imagery comes up for you and in what ways. And then recognizing that, okay, those things are tied to recalled imagery actually. They're not independent. You know, they are very much together. That's one of the joys of being a human being, is that we can bank our experiences. And it's that total experience that when you're in Axio and you're saying like, okay, right, I've read this text. How is it serving me? Okay, or sorry, rather, what am I associating, right? You're going to associate some perceptual imagery and some recalled imagery, right? Then how is that moving through the body? Like, what can I do here physically that somehow seems to feel right with this image? You know, like, when have I experienced this before? When am I really embodying this thing? And that's keying into a sense of rightness in the self, or kind of alignment. And then, you know, extending that into what is this like to be in this mode for the duration of life, you know, 24/7. And so I want to, perhaps I can offer an exercise here, which might be useful for keying into this sense of rightness. Is that on brand for what we're doing?
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Is that cool? So, hello, audience members. So wherever you are, it's just like, I'm going to run you through the procedure of an exercise that we do here as part of TIAMAT. It's a very basic exercise that you can do anytime, anywhere, and it's really fun. Okay, so I'm going to give the instructions, and then you can pause this talk and then do this exercise and come back, and Voiter and I will continue. Okay. Well, what I'd like you to do is go to like a window or a door, you know, even like if it's your garden, for example. Okay. And the first thing I'd like you to do is to pick a particular vantage point. Okay. Something that an amount of space that you're looking at, and then define a frame around it. Okay. If you're at your window, obviously it's easier to do. You just define the window as your frame. Okay. And it's kind of like you're looking at an art piece in a gallery. Right? See if you can allow your eye to not focus on anything in particular, but just have that open. Now, go onto YouTube or your phone or whatever, and just pick a piece of music. Pick a piece of music that you are not super familiar with, but is not completely unknown to you. It's somewhere in the middle. All right. Now, all you're going to do is you're going to play this piece of music and watch this art piece. It's kind of like a live music video. And what I'd like you to do is to key into these moments of rightness that occur. And it's very difficult to explain what this is, but I explain it rightness as like, I think I've used this example quite a lot. When I'm looking for a word in a dictionary and I flip the dictionary open and I land on the page with the word on it, you know, it's like walking down the street and, you know, you hit a traffic light, but the traffic light changes at the exact time that you need to go without having to change your gait or the speed of your walking. Is that kind of, perfect. You know? So play this music, just watch that, and just notice moments where this happens. That's what we call rightness.
Wow, that's beautiful. That's that's beautiful. That's something like, it reminds me mainly the exercise, the parts of where you are not trying to focus on anything in particular, but you're trying to, you know, observe the whole thing. And I love this, like I do this exercise usually when I go meditate somewhere like outside or something, because you see the whole nature, the whole landscape, and you can realize in that moment that, you know, what you're perceiving is like you're actually perceiving a 2D picture, and your brain is creating afterwards the 3D version of it. And so you can defocus and kind of see, and suddenly it becomes the painting, it becomes the picture, which is 2D, and sometimes you can feel it a little bit, and it's also like a meditative, it has nice kind of feeling, calming feeling into it. But the change is that yesterday I was on a hill and I was watching for a really long time one point in space or on landscape, and suddenly I wrote down, when you are looking long enough, the things that you see will change. And it was interesting because, like, if you stay there for a long time, it's not really so, like, the organism is not used to that, so it starts to develop some, you know, different things. My contrast like changed, and then it started wiggling and stuff like that. So it was there was just something interesting that I experience sometimes.
Yeah, you describe is this kind of like synesthetic quality that occurs, and that's kind of what I'm trying to get at with this exercise also, is like you can put the music there and your brain will start to form these connections between what you're seeing and what you're hearing, you know. And the best part is that it's not just limited to the perceptual, it's also existential. It's creating a kind of like this moment of rightness. It's not something necessarily, you know, outside of ourselves. It's very it's embodied in a way. I'm going to draw some distinctions between habituation and embodiment, but this, for me at least, really trains the eye for beauty. You know, this I was talking to some students who are going through a workshop at the moment, and one of them was saying that, like, you know, when doing this exercise, it's like he felt quite at peace, and he felt that this was just a moment in time, and he felt very insignificant in the universe in a good way. It's kind of humbling in a way. And it's like, for me, that's very profound actually. Because I felt that, but I haven't been able to explain that before. And moments of this rightness, moments of this like cosmic perfection actually occur all the time, everywhere. We're just not aware of them, or we're not trained to look at them. But in your example, clearly, if you just stay and you look at one thing for a long time, the cosmic beauty within it starts to emerge. And who was this guy? There was like this Norwegian writer, a legendary Norwegian writer whose name escapes me now, who could look at a beetle for 4 hours.
Wow.
Right? And as a kid, and kids will do this as well, they will, like, you know, look at a bug or look at a leaf or like an animal for like hours and hours on end. What are they doing? They're actually renewing their attention on this thing and finding more and more things about it that's just bloody amazing. Like, that's an exercise in beauty, you know? Yeah.
Well, okay, I need to write down. Yes, I need to write down something, because I have like two thoughts and I can't lose it. So with this one, it's interesting because a similar thing actually happens during some psychedelic experience, for example. Well, so it happens as we are, you know, kids naturally. Then when we, you know, change our state of mind basically by, I don't know, staring at one thing or meditating or something. And then it happens also during like psychedelic experience when, I don't know, I had like, it was so funny. We were with my friends, and it was kind of, you know, I was paying attention to the set and setting, and I was fairly educated about the topic. So we had like trip sitter and everything, and we had magic mushrooms, and we found at one point our friend with the head in washing machine and exploring the space there, It was so like it was such a funny experience because like the washing machine is actually incredible. If you go there with your head, like even right now, try to make a sound there. It sounds like so. It sounds trippy even if you are not tripping, right? So
yes. It reminds me of like even when you're standing in front of the electric fan and you're going like, into the fan. Yeah. It's kind of like that. Yeah.
So I think it's so beautiful, like the playfulness that we can have as adults that we kind of lose sometimes. It reminds me serious play of John Verwicki. It feels like sometimes we lose the play and it's only serious, but no, it's literally serious play, all this thing, right? So I think we can get back into that state as well and kind of playfully explore the space around us. Okay, we can't obviously do it, I think, in modern world. Like we have to do some things that we have to focus on and just do it, but we can have cycles and space and time every day, few minutes for playful exploration of the environment and our bodies in the environment, right? And that reminds me of the other thing I had, and it was, you were talking about brain, and it's so interesting because your movement practice and any movement practice and exploring the space of your body is so interesting because you can have one thought, one concept, one thing that you think about, and then you think about it in different patterns of your body. What it's going to do, it's going to make the context of the thing that you're thinking about different, right? So, yeah, so that's what I want to explore as well. How does it, how does the movement affect your mind? How does it maybe affect something you think about? And does this kind of mechanism, does it lead to maybe insight as well? Do you have some experiences or with your clients that it does that, or?
There's a lot. There's too many.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Okay. I think this is okay. So this is closely related to the idea of play, and I think that I want to look at a little bit more literature that might support this. But I feel that play is contingent on an encounter with the unknown. So when we get to the threshold of what is known, right, you start to fall into the void of the unknown, right? There are two large ways we can approach this, right? One is with a fuck ton of fear because it's scary and it's unknown. And then the other one is with the more explorational play. Yeah. So when this concept was brought up to me years and years ago, when I was very much into the work of Jerzy Grotowski, as a Polish director, and so he was training actors, and the first thing that he would do is always say, let people get all of the stereotypical archetypal things out first in any improvisation whatsoever. Get all the habits done and out of the way so that you get to that place of the unknown, and then play becomes more possible. The exploration becomes more possible. You can't do that without exhausting the habits, you see, as an initial step. So, okay, now if we want to get to, now I've lost the initial thread of the question because COVID has slowed my brain down.
Yeah.
It does that. Yeah. Serious play. Okay, get serious play, the unknown. Okay. So when we think about like how we move through life, a lot of it is actually habituated. And it's more habituated and less embodied. Embodied opens up play. Habituation closes down those possibilities. Yeah, and I'll put forward this argument, right? Because it's important that we draw these two things apart. Habituation is something like, say, okay, I think Ido Portal talks about this as well. Like, you learn movement patterns, learn ways of doing something, and it gets to the point where it becomes easier and almost effortless to execute them, right? So I used to be a parkour practitioner, and so you practice like vaulting the rail over and over again until every single time you can just vault the rail, and it becomes habituated, and that's great. Except that that's not what embodiment is. Because the funny thing about practicing parkour is that like it started to get to that place where I would go through my environment and I wouldn't look at rails the same way again. You wouldn't look at I don't look at walls the same way again. I go over there going like, oh yeah, that's climbable. Oh yeah, I could vault over that and could try that and do that. You get what I mean? It's changing the experience of life. Right? It's changing the salience landscaping. It's changing what's relevant to me. So when somebody goes like, okay, we have to get to the car park, so let's just go around. I'm like, no, there's a straight path here. Huh? Where? No, it's here. Just go over this thing and then through that thing and then you're there. Right? And so it's like the development of parkour vision. So when we talk about something being embodied, it's not just that my body can do it. It's like I know this is the way that I can interact with my environment in a different way. Habituation is actually the opposite of that. Is like I'm not even considering it. I'm just doing the thing in the way that I've always done. Right? So there's no possibility for play there. You have to break those things, get them out of the way first. And then when you get to the threshold of the unknown, and we're starting to get to this place where it's like you can explore into the unknown, and then you start to realize like, oh shit, wow, this is the way that I'm looking at my landscape. That's the metacognitive aspect. It's like going, I have never what's this word? Like, I have never conceived of a rail being vaultable. I have never conceived of, a wall yay high being anything short of dangerous. But it's like below your waist height. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you can only realize that you see or conceive the world in some way. And again, like, I love how it's efficient for our brain, right? It locks us in the frames of reference and it saves energy. And if you learn to sit one way, you know, like right now, I'm sitting, I'm doing incredible feats. As a baby, I couldn't do that, right? So I've learned it, and now I can do it, and I can talk to it even when I'm sitting. So yes, it's so useful. But then again, as we explore this space, we find out that, sometimes maybe some of those patterns and frames of reference and frames of our cognition aren't that useful, maybe, and maybe they are even bad for us. So maybe we can improve them. And what it feels like, as you're saying, is that we are exploring them through the exploration of the unknown, right? Because we only know how we are perceiving the world when we go beyond it, when we go a little bit above or a little bit, in some different space, because then you have the metacognition, right? Because if you are inside the space, it's so hard to see it differently. But as you are exploring it, then you can see it differently, because or you can see the way you see the world and realize, oh wow, I'm so locked into this way of perceiving the world. This is so amazing. Like, and the example with parkour is so cool, because right now I'm trying to explore that space a little bit, and I'm already seeing, like, through few hours of exploring that space, I'm already seeing, this is something I could jump on, right? This is something I can try some stuff there, and it's beautiful. I love this, and it's really like Verwickian transformation and transjective kind of. Nothing in the world changes, yet everything changes, right?
No, but think about what you're describing here. This is really powerful stuff. It's like being able to find out what one can do, what is possible. That's a process of actualization of the self, right? So it's not that the body is physically incapable of doing that thing, whatever that is. The body's role is really to adapt, and it's recognizing that. And I think this is where parkour is really wonderful. It's you're literally enacting that something is possible. So when we come down to this idea of one being you are the holder of your own truth, you're the beholder of your own truth. It's like, if you've done it before, I mean, you can't say that it's impossible. That's definitively wrong. Yeah, because you've already done it. You see? And so there's something, this is a powerful insight to have, because recognizing that possibility exists in a very tangible way, arguably, like I will argue that is an insight, but it's an important insight that moves ourselves towards greater and greater progression. And that's transformation. We cannot think of transformation as something that happens overnight. It's something that happens incrementally. And metacognition is one of those things that helps us track our progress. We tend to think of metacognition within an educational setting. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of great work that's been done since 1979 with Lavelle, but like metacognition has been historically present since before the time of Socrates, and recently there have been experiments done on animals, and this is the work of Joel Prew's this wonderful book called The Foundations of Metacognition, where they were actually able to detect that animals had metacognitive ability. It's just not a declarative one. It was a procedural kind of metacognition. So what they did was a wonderful experiment, man. They have dolphins, and they give the dolphins a task, right? So you try and identify tones that were rising in frequency. And the thing is that they would give the dolphins the opportunity to opt out and to say no to doing the task.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Right. And they did the same thing with rhesus monkeys and 3-year-old children as well. Right. And what they had noticed was that the dolphins were exhibiting behaviors of uncertainty and hesitation. The closer and closer they were getting to the ceiling of their perceptual frequencies. So the harder it became for the dolphins to actually hear and distinguish those frequencies, the more uncertain they became. And they actually started adaptively choosing the opt-out option. Now, of course, the dolphin is not going like, I don't know. He's not telling you I don't know. But the dolphin knows that it doesn't know. You see, and it can track that. It's not going to say, I'm nervous about this, but it behaves in that way. And it was similar with the rhesus monkeys and with the 3-year-old children. And this is the thing that I'm trying to get people to be a little bit kinder with themselves about. It's like, just because you can't propositionalize something or conceptually declare it does not mean that you are not aware of it and therefore can make adjustments to it. You see, if you're feeling something, and let's face it, man, a lot of these things are emotional things which are largely ineffable, right? We want to talk about remembering what it's like to, be kind to somebody, for example. That's not something that one can propositionalize. It's that it's made up of different kinds of, again, perceptual imagery and recordipatry, right? You're remembering a memory, you're remembering, some association you had at that time, the tone of your voice, the sense of time. Even then, some people saying, oh, time slowed down when this happened. You can't conceptualize that. But that awareness of it in and of itself is a metacognitive act, independent of the representation. So I'll give a sort of a practical tool, right? Or at least try to give a practical tool. If you want to test your metacognition, try and remember something wrongly on purpose. Try to remember my name wrongly on purpose. Mm-hmm. What happens?
Well, so when you asked the first one, I couldn't really do it because there was too much, like, overwhelm. But if it was particular, your name, I could change one syllable or something. But yeah, it was the right name was included in that. So I don't know, like I could change.
Well, you know
one
that
syllable.
It's wrong.
Yeah, I knew that it's wrong. Yeah.
Yeah. And so again,
I
coming down to
see.
the sense, you get what I mean?
Okay.
It's
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
when we are trying to, like, okay, if you're trying to remember something, remembering something is committing to the goal of remembering it correctly. You know that it's wrong. Even if you change one syllable, you also know that it's wrong, right? It's impossible to remember something wrongly on purpose, you see, because you always know. Now, that in itself is procedural metacognition. You get what I mean?
Yeah.
We're committed to that. And so if we're going to be attacking the issue of sort of self-deception is built upon the idea that you are the beholder of your own truth, right? And so when I start working with people, I always start to try and tune them into this idea of the bullshit light, right? Have you ever done something that when you do, there's this bit of you that's going like, that's not great. That's the bullshit light. Is that something is not, actors are very familiar with this because they get told by a director to do something that, they actually don't want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to listen to that. Listen to that a little bit so that insofar as you can actually get a sense of, oh, what is it that I actually want? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. I have many thoughts on that. So I'm wondering. Okay, it feels like we are. I would call this kind of intuition, maybe. It feels like your body, your organism, is perceiving a lot of patterns that you cannot consciously perceive, and therefore it has some wisdom, some information that you lack in your mind, and it just feels like something. It's this kind of short path between, okay, the organism knows something and it needs to do something, but it doesn't have the whole amount of time and processing power to get it into your mind, because you wouldn't be able to conceive of it because it's too much things, right? It's too much. Yeah, exactly. So you kind of develop this intuition and then you act upon it. But the thing is, like, for me, it's really difficult, and one of the hardest things to do is to find harmony between, okay, when does the intuition itself bullshits you, right? Because you have the bullshit light that tells you, oh, this is not right. But sometimes, like, you have so many things deep down, like evolutionary, like, I don't know, from your family, from your friends, from your environment, and light itself can be bullshitting you. So for me, it's like this one of the hardest things that we as humans are doing is finding a balance and harmony between, okay, when is this a right, like, intuition or tendency that I have, and when is it like, okay, I don't have to listen to this because it needs to be, I don't know, not proven, but maybe this is also like, it's a form of self-deception, because we know we have so many biases and so many things that kind of deceive through which we deceive ourselves. So I was thinking about this a lot, and it feels like you go into a metacognition about what your tendency is, because this is not something that that is like, it's not one-time thing, right? It can be, but the most important thing is your tendency. What are your tendencies? What it draws you to, what something draws you to itself, and what something repels you from itself. So, and I think it's between finding this harmony and being metacognitive about the tendency itself, and kind of trying to calibrate this tendency and think about, not only feel it, but go into the proposition and not stay in the tyranny of procedure. Because I think you can say, oh, I feel this, so I will do this. And yeah, okay, that's amazing. But sometimes it can be bullshitting yourself. And that's what I think you talked about in the procedural tyranny. So you go back into the mind and you explore this space and you say, okay, what is the tendency? What tendency throughout my life would be the most beneficial one? And then you try to cultivate that. Does it make sense? Because it feels like it's really hard to do, but also very important.
Okay, so dude, like I really appreciate you elucidating that, because you've actually brought to light a very important epistemological question, which is how does my intuition, my learned patterns, my implicit pattern recognition, all of these things which are like I can trust as feelings, what if those things are screwing me up actually? Yeah. What if those things are causing me to make terrible decisions? And this, I think, is at the core of the question of why we need to have ecologies of practice, because ecologies of practice don't just offer the procedure to overcoming self-deception and self-destruction. They offer the context to try those things out and to screw up, you know? And so within TIAMAT, what we're kind of offering is you offer this somewhat improvisational context. It has some exercises which have qualities built in or improvisation built in, right? But it's so that one can make that shift, that transparency opacity shift, start to see those tendencies. You know, I was like, I think one of our first sessions, we had a student come in and she would be, you know, considered by most people at that point in time in her life anyway, what we would call a far left feminist, right? And so she was articulating for mostly half the session of like, oh, you know, I feel difficult, like I feel intimidated, this is a male-dominated space, I'm the only girl here, because Tamaki had not arrived from Singapore at that point. It's like, okay, you know, but she was articulating all of these things and, you know, saying, oh, you know, I feel very, very terrified. And then during one of the exercises, I was paired with her, and then you know, we were sort of running one of these exercises, and then she said, like, you know, oh, you know, I feel really like terrified of you because you're like the guru of the space and everything, and you know, you are a male and you are like, you know, quite articulate and da da da. And I went, yes, okay, what I'm hearing is like, when I hear this, I feel very kind of blasé about it. Actually, I was very like brutally honest. And this is in the context of one of our transjective rationality exercises. And I said, like, you know, I feel kind of like blasé about the thing you've just said. And I actually am feeling like I'm speaking to an idea, and I'm more curious about what's the person behind this.
Yes.
And her response to that immediately afterward was like literally the next thing she said was, okay, wow, hearing that, I realized that I put identities on everybody. And like, I feel this weird, strange level of acceptance is very estranged from me. I'm not used to feeling this level of safety around somebody. Oh shit. You know, and I went, great. Like hearing that, I feel really close to you now. I feel like I'm talking to a human being.
Wow.
You know what I mean? So
yes.
there's this sensation that like in the right context, those things, you can see whether or not they are bullshitting you or not. Do not wait for when the stakes are too high and you can't afford to fuck up and you have to make a binary decision of a 1 or a 0 before you examine your tendencies. Get into a context, a community where the examination of those tendencies is valorized and appreciated. That people are willing to sit down with you and go, yeah, actually, why do you do that? You know, what's that about? So that if ever a time came up when you need to make a decision like that, it's not going to be life or death. It would be, you know, pickle on the side or in the burger, you know. That's where I think you get you. Does that make sense? Like that's why ecologies of practice are necessary.
That makes perfect sense. It reminds me that for many of those ecologies of practices, you need other people, and you need other people who are on different levels of perceiving the world and themselves, and how they are tuned to themselves, and it feels like you are courageous actually in that practice, because you stayed true to yourself and you communicated what you truly felt. Not many people would feel that, and not many people would communicate that. So I feel, and that opened up that space, right? Your truthfulness to yourself, and she needed it as well, and she opened up afterwards too. I think the ecologies of practices are super important. That's what we actually, like, many similar things we do on our, it's called like meaningful camp, which we do in here in Czech Republic. And we have, for example, some like exercise, just people talking to themselves about what it means for them to be authentic. And this kind of thought gives you this kind of serious play aspect, because you just talking about being authentic, but in that way you are embodying the authenticity, right? You need to, like, okay, when I'm being authentic, right? And you are embodying the authenticity there, actually. So like it feels like really, like, these things are really like important, I think. And
I'm not entirely sure about that. Sorry. Because that strikes me, because I think I'm also aware and cognizant of the other half of the equation, or the negative side of that, which is where I try and keep my eye on as well, particularly as a facilitator, is that in talking about authenticity, if that's coming from a place of self-deception, and one is unaware of one's own tendencies, then actually those things become misconstrued as authenticity. And this is like a joke that I toss around, which is about narcissistic spirituality disorder. Yeah. It's like, oh, I'm a Scorpio man, so I'm allowed to treat everybody like shit. I'm like, no, basically, it's not an excuse.
Yeah, that's actually that's true, because I'm fortunate enough, like, to work with amazing human beings, and I know there are many, because yes, like here are also many like different bubbles of communities, which if they are more on the spiritual side, there tends to be a lot of spiritual bypassing, and there can be a lot of like dark traits included, and it's really dangerous. For example, as you just said, like, one of the perfect examples is like, okay, every argument that anyone can have, or criticism, you can just say, oh, it's only a reflection of yourself, and it's not really true. But it's also, that could be such a bullshitting, and it's so dangerous. So how do you work with that on, like, during your practices as well? Like, I'm really curious. Like, fortunately, people are listening to us talking on our show, and the same people, like, we are very, like, we try to be very, very, like, evidence-based, very open at the same time, non-dogmatic, and we are cultivating this for a long time, and people feel it, and they are attracted to that. So we attract similar people, so we don't tend to have this kind of weird, like, too much spirituality or something, and we are very fortunate for that. But like, if we are working in those communities, or some people come, how do you work with that? Like, how do you break that space up? Because it's very hard, and sometimes people cannot see through that. They can't see the world that way. They're locked inside of that space. So like, how do you work with that, actually?
Well, it's really tough. Like, first of all, it's tough for both sides. Whether you're the group or you're the participant coming in, that's not an easy thing to do. What does help doing that actually is continuity of contact. Okay, so I think we can approach this from a few different angles. Now, the first thing is that as a facilitator, and it's my bread and butter. So as a facilitator, it's recognizing that where the person is at is more important than where I think they should be.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And this is kind of in the idea that, say, okay, so somebody might make you might be engaged in an activity. for example, any activity within the TIAMATian lexicon. Okay. And it's, for all intents and purposes, not correct. It's not perfect. It's not done in the way that it's supposed to be. But it's a hell of a lot better than where they had come before. Right. Now, at that point, this person might, for all intents and purposes, be self-deceptive and go like, wow, this was really sick. Like I really felt that, and like I never thought I could move my elbow in this way, and whatever. And it's like they're really getting hung up on that. As a facilitator, I might know, okay, yeah, they're too attached to that. They're gonna have to release that sooner or later, because it's starting to form into patterns where all they're doing is just leading everything from the elbow. And it's forming itself into another tendency. But it's the sensation that they are so interested in this thing. It has never been accessible to them before, that they want to push it to the end and explore with it as much as they can. That mode of exploration, that way of seeing the relationship to the body, right, is a long way away from, oh, I've been traumatized by a lot of people and I hate my body. I don't give a shit whether or not you can move your body completely and you can dance. I'm more interested in the fact that you've now adjusted the lens in which you engage with the world. So this means that as there is continuity of contact and people come into these sessions over and over again, yes, maybe 3 weeks later, I can bring it up to them, or they can realize themselves that like, yeah, I remember when 3 weeks ago, I was really hung up on my elbow for some weird shit. Like, I found the whole body more interesting than that. I go, yeah, it's great, and there's an inevitability about that. But I think that's, again, why it's not just the ecologies of practice, but it's also the communities in which those sit, where there really is this extension of good faith, man. And it's to say that, like, okay, I know where you're at right now. People have gone through this before, and it's a bad step in the good direction. Mm-hmm. It's a necessary pothole that's been stepped in. And the fact is that if you're only going to show up once, right, for a chat or a dialogue or something like that, and it goes absolutely terribly and it's really, really unpleasant, and it's like, I never want to do that again. It's like, I'm sorry, the person that loses out, unfortunately, on the growth is you. You have to maintain a continuity of contact for the growth to become apparent. Otherwise, it just feeds into the narrative of like, oh, all the science people are really academic and elitist. All the, hippies are just like blitzed out of their minds. And like, oh, no, I know scientists who are blitzed out of their minds.
Yeah, this is beautiful.
Their heads in washing machines.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, this is beautiful. I love that. Like, so you can actually use this for yourself as well. Like in similar way, being in contact. Like, so right now I've been experiencing for past 7 months, I've been experiencing like this really huge drop after like 5 intense years, this drop of energy, and having like chronic like tiredness syndrome or whatever it's called, something like that. And it's been like, you're used to being like having downs for like few days, maybe a week or something. But if the down is lasting for a few months and your head is spinning almost every day, it's been like really hard to not get frustrated. Like, I could get frustrated and I was okay with that. But I was trying to accept actually what is happening to me, that I need time, patience, and stuff like that. And I think it was like a similar kind of procedure where I needed to stay in contact with myself and not like compare myself, all those advices. Oh, don't compare yourself to other people. Compare to yourself a few days ago, a month ago, a year ago. Well, if I did that, I was much better those days, like energetically and like many other ways. I didn't have a brain fog like I did like a few months ago. And I thought I accepted But actually, deep down, I thought about myself as like I'm a piece of shit, right? And and if you have that in deep down, it's going to affect things. And so I needed to stay in contact and be true to myself and realize, oh, there's this feeling of me not being enough. And I can't think about me like few years ago or months ago. I need to be here right now and realize, okay, what is the best possible mindset for me? What are the steps that I have to take to get anywhere, to move in, right direction? So it feels like similar. You don't push someone into you don't push him into a space where you want him to be. Like that's other aspect as well. You think he's supposed to be there, but yes, you kind of know the direction if you are a lecturer or have some expertise in that. And well, for me it was the same thing actually. I couldn't push myself, I need to be there, like I need to be a year from now. No, like it's impossible to be there right now, and it's not useful for me. I need to come back right here right now and see, okay, what do I do today? What space I'm going to explore to stay active, to stay open, to stay, positive and stuff like that. And it was really like interesting experience to to do that actually. So it feels like a little bit similar and a beautiful practice to do with if you are a lecturer, to do with your clients, to do with your community, but also maybe to do with yourself sometimes, because we tend to bullshit ourselves as well in those ways, and you need to explore that space of your mind and your body and move maybe one step a day, and some advices maybe are not going to be useful for you, and you need to find your own advice. So that was just
absolutely. You're right, because you're talking about building self-compassion.
Yes.
Right. And this is because I'm also dealing with this brain fog thing, and I am worried about CFS, chronic fatigue syndrome, as a long-term COVID scenario. I'm struggling with the same fucking thing, man. It's like waking up going, I really don't feel like myself from like 2 weeks ago before COVID. That's really weird.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like disassociated. Am I on the same page with what you're describing?
Exactly the same.
Yeah. So like the way, maybe I can also share the way that I approach it, and this is helpful, because I felt like what you were articulating there, of getting a sense of not buying into the hustle culture idea of like, compare yourself with who you were like last week. There's validity in that, except in the situation where who you were in the past is better than who you are now. Right? So it's like, then it can feel a bit shit. But for me, the way that I look at that is like, okay, what's happening right now? Like, really, what's happening right now? What am I experiencing? And what am I capable of doing at this point? And to recognize, especially in the context of what is happening, like if I'm just recovering from an illness, for example, right? Then I know that it's rationally better to not force myself too hard, to not push myself to beyond the point where my body will start to break down, But then it's also recognizing that this is kind of like an episode, right? Let's call it a chronic fatigue syndrome episode, or it's the chronic fatigue syndrome arc. And in that moment, it's like, okay, let me see what happens on day one. I'm going to try and experiment with this. Okay, I feel this level of tiredness. Can I push that further? And then the second day, you realize that like, shit, that made me wake up at 2 o'clock, trying to find the causal patterns, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, fuck, that made me wake up at 2 o'clock. But maybe it's not that. Maybe it's because I drank too much at the end of that. I'll try that by not drinking. And on day 3, it's like, no, I'm still waking up at 2 o'clock and still doing the same things. You get what I mean? Because then I think that taking care of oneself, trying to explore one's own kind of causal patterns, the journey of self-knowledge becomes interesting. It becomes like a game.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, oh, what can I do here that's going to be fun? That might be better. And if it's great, it's great. So not just about building self-compassion, but building self-compassion in a way that is enjoyable for life. Yeah. No point being compassionate with yourself and then it's like you're miserable.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, this reminds me what helped me like the most, I think, was that I reframed my tiredness with feeling of calmness. Like I've started talking to myself like, I'm not tired, I'm calm. And I started like, okay, I had this energy past year or something. Like I was pushing things, I was exploring things. It was really like cognitively demanding and physically demanding and stuff like that. Okay. I lost a little bit of connection to maybe the spiritual, to maybe something that, for me, spirituality is just like, okay, you realize you are like this psychedelic nature of being, like you realize you're part of the universe and you are transjective, right? And all those things, like very basically, like very like evidence based, but very on the ground, like you can kind of touch it, like the realness of things, but the realness is psychedelic, right? So for me, that's kind of spirituality. And I felt like, oh, I lost this like connection that I was cultivating and developing, and maybe this is the kind of energy, like the calmness and stuff. I can explore this space right now, and it's different. And that state before didn't allow me that. Like it was, so I was like, wow, yeah, I can play in this space. It's exactly as you said. I found a playground that I can enjoy playing there, even though I am at this state as I am right now. So that was one of the most helpful things. And yeah, the other thing is not to like, it feels like it's easy to give up. Like it's easy, oh, I'm just gonna, not do anything. Yes, it's nice to be like, be a friend for yourself, and when you need to just rest and watch like TV shows and everything, that's totally fine. But also have this practice of exploring the space, what you can do. Okay, I know I can't go to the gym anymore right now because when last time I went to the gym and like two times in a row, when I pushed it, I was sick afterwards. Okay, so I can't go to the gym. Well, okay, what if I could do like 2 kettlebell swings? What if I could do like a few push-ups? And you are exploring this space and you find out, oh, wow, you can do a little bit of that. You can do a little bit of that, and you can do a little bit of yoga. And if you push it like throughout the time, you have to still be in touch with the unknown, because you don't know if you can do it, right? Yeah. So you're still exploring, okay, am I locking myself up in this position of not being able to do things? So we are back again with the parkour and exploring of the unknown. It's the same thing, but on the basic level of you moving throughout the life.
Yes, exactly. And think about this, right? It's like when you're at the gym, that's the context. The context is set for you. All the tools there are set for you. You got your kettlebells here, your bench press there, you got your treadmills there. It's like everything is done for you. It's convenient. You go inside there, you can turn your brain off and you know what to do. After you set the machine the right way. Right? But if you're in this unknown context, right? And say, yeah, okay, I got a couple of kettlebells which I bought on Amazon for X amount of money. I haven't touched them, right? What can I do with this here? And then look at what happens, right? The kind of affordances that are generated become different. Oh, I don't have to be self-conscious because there's nobody else here in their Lululemon pants judging me. I can experiment with different kinds of ways to play with kettlebells. I can do my yoga wrongly, but I want to sense the body. I want to, maybe I turn my hip this way, which I was never able to do in a public setting in a gym, right? And then these things are really important because the privacy of our practices And I don't mean this in like a cultish way. I'm talking about privacy as in like your personal relationship with the practice is as important as the progress of the practice itself. No point if you can build a shit ton of muscle and you can bench press a lot of the thing if the attitude towards the body, the attitude towards the practice is not changing. That's why there are some people who I think really have taken a practice on as a way of life, right? What John is talking about, seeing the universe in a grain of sand. I talk about it as like, explain life through a noodle. It's the ikigai idea that you're accepting very profound principles in a very simple activity. What's this book? I think Murakami wrote it. What I think about when I think about running, or Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. Mm-hmm. They talk about that. It's very, very interesting. This idea that you could actually, coming back to that thing that you were talking about at the start of this call, of like going and looking at the landscape, you focus on one point, and then it starts to the universe starts to unfold for you. Mm-hmm. In that it's exactly that principle. Mm-hmm. And I feel that this is something that has also been coming up, which I wanted to name in our conversation. You sent it to me in a question as well. Like, what's the relationship between order and chaos? Right. And I'm curious about what your stance is on that before I sort of share mine, because I'm very fascinated by this question.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's a little bit similar. Also, like, it's similar for me to the known and the unknown, and to the like finding the balance between things and harmony. So like it feels okay. It feels like I need to cultivate like both of those kind of way of life, kind of basically. And I usually try to, when I'm developing or cultivating some practice, mindset, whatever it is, I trying to find order first, because it feels like I'm exploring the unknown. I'm a little bit in chaos, and I need to be strict and find rules and be in order. Well, after a few years or a few months, wherever it is, whatever the topic is or the practice is, I can slowly then be more and more allow more and more of chaos to be introduced. Why? Because I don't have to think about the order anymore. I'm starting to embody the order, and I can invite the chaos back in. So I have it very it feels like very down to earth for me, because I work in this way. I practice things in this way, and it's very like natural to me, and it feels other way it wouldn't work as well, because I need to be very orderly and strict sometimes, because I don't have integrated the practices or something. I can't really feel them. I don't really know them. I have to be very orderly. So this is kind of my relationship, and I think there are like different kind of levels, but this is like the something that comes to mind when I think about it.
How has that worked for you? Like, in what domains is it very effective?
Okay, so it worked for me in many like different kind of themes, and it was learning some new topics. For example, if I'm preparing for a show, for a podcast or something, I need to study it very hard, and I need to learn these things. But then if it's past like few months after, like I can kind of forget it, and I can just sit in front of microphone, and I don't have the things like right next to me. I don't have to read them, but I introduce some chaos into it, and I'm open. So I know things, but then I can develop some insights, because it's the same way as we talked about. Like, I'm not locked into the frame of reference, or frame of perceiving. I know the frame, but I can accept it, I can transform it and change it a little bit and invite the chaos. So that's one thing. Other thing is when I was really like I was starting just to like eat healthy, fast, and all these things. Where like I was very orderly at first. I did like ketogenic diet. I did a lot of things, and yes, it was kind of too much. But also for me, I learned through the experience that, oh, this is not for me. This works for me. So I got to know myself through the extreme, and it was like a year of kind of extreme, and then wow, I have integrated some of the rules, and now I can be free and invite chaos. And it's I feel so great right now because I don't have to think about it. I have integrated some of the rules, but I can do basically whatever I want, and I know how much I can do some things like, yeah. So that's another thing. Another thing is like movement practice as well. So movement is important, and for me it was very important. And I started going to the gym, and I was doing things where like I was doing things strictly in yoga as well. And then, as you've said, oh, what if I do this? What if I do that? And then it transformed into like ecstatic dances, and I feel very good in it. And there's always this switch between like learned movements, something that I repeat, and then, oh, I'm repeating this too much. Let me explore this space a little bit more. So this is also like order and chaos, it feels like.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. I don't need to say anything. You got it. No, okay, great. So I'm going to now. I think. Let's call it a naturalistic exploration of order and chaos. It's like, and this comes to a lot of the work in dynamic systems theory. So I'm going to try and approach it from a slightly different way and use a different paradigm. When we think about a rehearsal, right? In a rehearsal setting, we're trying to score something. We put some markers down or some constraints down, okay, and say like, okay, we're going to go do this thing happens, that thing happens, that light goes off here, okay, and that's the order, that's the structure. And then within that, there is a boatload of chaos, right? So within that, those defined parameters, those path boundaries, there's a lot of room for improvisation and exploration. Okay, great. Now, those explorations and happy accidents, we call them, right, then start to inform the next set of path constraints. You see? So it's like, okay, we use this idea of like, that was great, keep that, right? It's like, okay, so now that thing that was previously chaotic has now become something that we can mark down as a constraint or something that we can stick with, right? And then that creates a whole different set of chaos, but within a more like limited scope, And then again, that cycle repeats again and again and again. And when you do this long enough, we eventually hit something called, this is like, what is it called? It's called circular causality. Mm-hmm. And so, so one set of constraints informs the boundaries of the chaos informs the next set of constraints, and until we hit a point of metastability. And metastability is that there is a certain level of consistency while still allowing the room and the openness for the disruption, because whatever is going to be disrupted is not necessarily going to destroy that integrity of what happened. I think that's kind of what you're getting to with the sense of having integrated it, right? And this is like, I can give another example. It's like a tree, right? So a tree has grown, an old tree is grown in a certain way, right? To the point where a freaking typhoon could come in, for example, right? And it still stays. It's still going to stay. And that's why I'm offering up as the metaphor for metastability, is that thing is going to go, but it can stay. Somewhat poetic. And when I think about order and chaos and the way that they dynamically inform each other, I also quite see how often, we can just consider them completely independent of each other. to our own detriment. That no, I must have order. I must put things down in this way. The world is chaos. It's going to destroy us all. Come, stay a while and listen. The Lord of Terror has returned. No, it's not that. It's that the process of order itself being formed is iterative.
Mm-hmm.
And it's in that circular causality that we find the grace and the compassion to be kind to oneself.
Mm-hmm.
You see, rather than being hard with oneself about there's too much chaos here. No. Slow down. Chill out. Right? Build that slowly. What more path constraints do you want to adjust in? Yeah.
That's beautiful. It reminds me that, like now my approach would be a little bit different based on the experiences that I've had, because I developed the compassion, but also what we talk about here, like funny thing is, like we are talking here in proposition, like it's a proposition, right? Kind of, okay. But then, okay, for someone it's gonna be like, wow, cool, like I have insight and I can now maybe try this in my life. But for someone it's gonna be like, oh, that's words and I don't even like feel them really, and they're gonna, bang their head against the wall, and that's the best day for them, and they will learn that way. So it's funny how we can go through different kinds of knowing, and I love it. It's beautiful. You've said interesting thing which reminded me of something that John talks about, and it's if we come back a little bit in time during the talk, it was that people, like it was about the mode of being that they kind of develop when they are developing some path. It's not about like exploring the elbow itself, because wow, I've explored this space and I want to explore it to the full, but it's about the approach, how they see the world. So it feels like you don't get the information itself. It's not about the elbow itself, it's about the approach. And that's the same way as with psychedelic experiences, as John talks about. Oh, I found this connection between this and me and that, and well, many much information around me, and you are also like hyper associative during the experience. And he talks about letting go of that information, but including and remembering the mode of being that you're exploring there. And this comes to the possibilities, the realization of you being able to feel like something or doing something. For me, this is also one of the most important realizations, because the possibility itself is like, it feels like it makes you curious, because wow, like how is it possible like that I feel this way? How is it even, like I didn't have a conception of this before, and now I can think about it and I can, wow, I experience something. So these are the aspects of the pyramid of knowing, right? And I think your practice is beautiful because it puts you inside of some context and inside something, not in the proposition, but it goes deeper and it explores the space, what's possible, and makes people curious, and that leads to self-transformation. It feels like, is it like something you would think about it this way as well, or
I've never thought of it that way, and actually I want to thank you for that, because you're right, it's not rooted in the propositional. And I think that's also answering for me like why, I mean, I love our chat, but why I tend to have anxieties about speaking about TIAMAT in a propositional form. I always encourage people to come in and try and participate. Now, whether or not it makes people curious is the second part of where I want to tie this into this question of psychedelics and transformative experiences, because I don't feel that curiosity is something that is taught as much as it is allowed to emerge. And I've been thinking about this in relation to a religion that's not a religion. I think that also feels like the same thing. It can't really be designed. But it can have some conditions put in place to encourage the emergence of it.
Isn't it the same way as you like exploring the space when we are on rehearsal?
Yes, absolutely. Like, it's totally that. It's like there is, like, I can go in as a director and I can know what the show is and I can build it to scale. But first of all, that's not fun for me. I know some directors do it that way, but it's not fun for me. I much prefer to set some conditions down and then see the play as it is birthed into being. And that's, for me, the same thing with watching actors or watching people grow. It's like, I want to be in a relationship with you so I can see how you grow. That's a blessing. And that's something that a friend told me and Tamaki on our wedding day. It's like, what a blessing it is to watch people grow, And so if I think about it from the standpoint of, okay, what is TIAMAT then doing? I think that what TIAMAT is kind of doing is it's setting. Wow. Okay, I'm getting an insight, but I'm having to work through it. It's like, this is fascinating. It's trying to set the conditions from which a cascade of insights can occur.
Wow.
And so if we think about it from a transformative experience point of view, sorry, from a psychedelic point of view, it's like, I think it's all well and good that you can, pop a tab of acid and see Shiva in the sky. It's no problem. I'm not here to knock the metaphysics, but my question afterwards is then like, well, in the aftermath of that experience, are you able to reclaim the mode of being that led to that? Because I think it's cheapening it to say that I dropped a tab of acid. It's probably more than that. There is a certain, like, even in the excitement leading up to it, or the nervousness, or if you meditate for 3 hours before that, or the ritual, right? You travel out into the desert and then you go and attend an ayahuasca ceremony. It's like that pilgrimage is a kind of process where something is happening to prep you for that place. So is transformative experience contingent on the ingestion of psychedelics? No, it can't be. Otherwise, we wouldn't learn anything, right? But if you can build that mode of being without psychedelics to get to that, then you can command it at will, pretty much. You can alter your state of consciousness at will, which is magic. Yeah. And so I'm just hedging my bets on 4 cognitive mechanics, which I think can get us there.
Yeah, me too actually. Like psychedelic experiences help me a lot to get like insight and I meta view and perception kind of a little bit. I was really inspired, and but as you've said, like I had really like period before intensely studying it, exploring that space. If you read about psychedelics, you instantly get into some really like psychonautish interesting topics, and if you are open, you can explore them. And yeah, so for me it's like also I hedge the same way as you on this like cognitive aspect of things and transformation through other practices, like meditation, so powerful. Anyway, you mentioned consciousness, and I will now just ask you a few like kind of last questions. What do you think about consciousness? Yeah, any thoughts you have? If you don't have any, it's fine, but if you have any thoughts, I would be cool to hear.
I think that it's a complex argument, rightly so, is the hard problem of consciousness. I hope that I can eventually learn more about it, because it's a long while. I'm deep into that study. And right now, the only thing that I can say about consciousness is that it's an emergent property between an agent and an arena. And the agent and the arena all happen to be dynamic, and self-organizing properties. It's almost as if once you become aware of the arena, you now are the arena then becomes the agent. And so we're starting to get into the recursive relevance realization that John is talking about, right? Now, I suspect, again, this is a suspect because I'm an artist first and foremost, not a scientist. But I suspect that it eventually moves itself into a singularity. That the agent and the arena fall into a singularity. And this is where we start to talk about, ego death or...
Do you mean eventually as time goes on in the universe, or eventually as you as a person go in your life and can achieve that state, or like that feeling?
If you continue the recursive relevance realization, and you go, okay, I'm not my body, right? I'm not my body, I'm observing my body, right? Or I'm observing myself observing my body, or I'm observing myself observing. I am. What is the self? You start to, you get into these this recursive steps, right? Eventually, that falls into a singularity where even wrong already. It's a pure consciousness event. It's like I doesn't even exist. The semantics of it doesn't exist. And so this is an exercise which I ask people to try a lot. Especially in my coaching clients, I always ask them, okay, just pick the fucking hardest question that you can think of and write it down. Okay. And it's kind of a Zen, it's a Zen koan exercise, right? It's like you pick the hardest fucking question and then you answer that question. And then you argue against that answer and then ask the question again. So like, what is love? Okay, love is a chemical reaction between two organic creatures that promote survival and reproduction. Okay, then argue against it. Yes, well, that is a biological aspect. However, it does not answer for the phenomenological, emotional aspect of it. Therefore, what is love? Right. And then you're right, love is the da 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 da. Okay, you keep going. And then the question here is like, when do you stop? Well, you stop when the answer that you have, and there is one, and you know it, but the answer that you have cannot be represented semantically. It is only felt. That's where you stop.
That's beautiful. Wow. I love it, like how many different practical tools we've explored today. What do you think about and pure consciousness event, and then at oneness, those two things that connect, and you have this enlightenment moment basically. Have you experienced that, like, or similar things to that?
Moments of enlightenment?
Yeah, either pure consciousness event or at oneness, or those two together during prajna, as John talks about it. Okay. Was it when was it? Was it during movement practice or meditative practice or some other practices?
All. I've gotten to a place where, and this is where I really stand by TIAMAT. We were doing a 3 steps 1 bow. So 3 steps 1 bow is a kind of Buddhist ritual that we do on Vesak Day, right? And you basically take 3 steps forward, then you bow down, then you get up and 3 more steps and carry on. So we had gone and done this, and this is like very early, in the morning. Go and do. And where TIAMAT helped me was just choreographing the bow. So I don't have to, I roughly know it, but it's not like I'm trying to compare, am I doing it correctly? Am I whatever, or this auntie is doing it differently from me 2 rows down. She's 60 years old and can't bend. It's like I can just focus on, okay, what's happening to my body? Go down, hands come up, and then I start to key into the flow with the mantra that's playing as we walk around the temple. This is like for an hour and a half or 2 hours, something like that, right? And eventually it got to the place where I was doing this like exactly in time. coming back to the metastability is like there were moments where I had to just like take one step to the left because someone has stopped in front of me or whatsoever, right? But it doesn't break the flow of the thing. About an hour in, we were coming around the statue of Siddhartha Gautama, and like I was so tired, man, like physically tired. But I wasn't attached to my tiredness. I just was like sweating like hell. My legs were hurting, my knees hurt and everything. And I hit a moment of, it's very close to bliss, but it's not exactly bliss. It was like, I'm so glad that I have this body to feel this thing. I became really grateful of having a body. You see? So there's something that I would call like a moment of enlightenment. Enlightenment in the sense that it really changed my relationship to my body. Mm-hmm. I always have a very tenuous relationship with my body, but like that process, that 3 steps, 1 bow made me view it in a different way. Wow. Yeah. I love it very much.
Beautiful. That's beautiful. So like some this and some things said before reminded me, and I wanted to share it with you. An experience that I've had yesterday, because I moved here into this place 3 months ago, and I need to have a nature nearby. So there is a little bit of nature, but yesterday I found this little hill. I sat there was a sunset, there were a lot of beautiful clouds, and I sat there, I meditated, and I was staring at the clouds, and I felt so like the same way as you talked about today. Like I felt so small, so insignificant, but it was this kind of, not in a negative sense, but in a positive sense. And I was so grateful for me being able to experience that, to be myself and move throughout this world and universe as I do, and to have experiences as that I have, and to be able to do what I do. And I don't believe in free will, for example. So for me, it's like I feel really lucky, and I was like, who is saying that? Like who is grateful? Who is thanking the universe or whatever for that? Well, I didn't choose it. Like I know I'm kind of separate, like, or not like separate, but I came to the point where I realized the universe is thanking itself, basically, because like I didn't do anything. Like I did all of those things, but also I didn't do anything. Like it just is happening, and it felt like so beautiful that I came, at least in my mind, I came to realization that, yeah, like I am the process of the universe that somehow emerged and assembled in a way that I am. I got the experiences that I have, and I did the things that I did just because of this happening and me being like part of it, yes. And I'm thanking the process, but I'm the process itself. And it was this, like, yeah, so that was my experience. I think it was a little bit similar.
Yes, you are the process itself. And this is interesting because you were brought up like, not believing in free will.
Yep.
Right. So I was having a conversation with a friend of mine the other day about retrocausality and whether or not like the future is, determining our present in the same way it determines our past, and, backwards and forward. And he was like really intent on pulling me into this argument with him. And I was sort of, and it made me really question this, and I was thinking about this. And I don't know if this is a cop-out, but I'd like to hear what you think about it. I am of the school of thought that we're never going to know, right? So whether we're leaning into a deterministic argument or leaning into a free will argument, or leaning into retrocausality, the fact is that I'm not going to know which one of these fellas are correct. And so there is a certainty of uncertainty, which is actually really, really secure. Like, great, this is one perennial problem question that I don't have to wreck my brain around. As if thinking about consciousness is not enough. It's like, I got to think about determinism. It's like, great, I don't have to worry about that, you know? And I think that as we lean into the certainty of uncertainty or become acquainted, I think becoming acquainted with the certainty of uncertainty actually affords a lot of room for exploration. Like, I'm never going to know what it's like to be you. Right? Like I literally cannot transfer consciousness, not transfer brain. I can't transfer consciousness from myself to you, right? All that time and all that experience is gone. Even if I was able to do it now, it's very different experience, right? I'm never going to be able to do that. Fantastic. That means that I can now be more curious about you as a separate human entity. And it doesn't have to matter whether or not you are believing the free will argument or you're not, we're different in these places or not. It doesn't fucking matter. At the end of the day, this relationship increases my quality of life, right? It helps me think about more things. Okay, if I'm going to be harped up on whether or not this uncertain question is going to whether if I'm going to be harped up on the answer to that uncertain question, which I'm never going to know, and I have to sacrifice this thing, then my quality of life drops through the fucking floor. That's self-destructive as far as I'm concerned. How's that landing with you?
Yeah, it's something beautiful actually. So we share a lot, and then in some ways we split a little bit, but still share a lot. So we share a lot so what I think about anything is that like I can't be certain about anything except my experience in this exact moment right now. And this is what I experienced it a second ago, a minute ago. I cannot be certain about anymore because it's, it's biased through my memories and stuff like, yes. So that's the only thing that I believe 100% in my experience right now, and right now, and right now, and right now. And it's gone already, but right now it's new one. And so then if I have this like perception, I can explore things freely, right? So I'm not locked into, it's deterministic or it's not free will or it is. But then I like to, it's just my like, it's like intellectual porn for me. I love to think about it. I love the topic and everything. So it increases my enjoyment of my life as well, and it's beautiful. And so for me, then what I try to do and what is kind of important for me is to explore, in at least like in the propositional space and then in the other spaces as well, to explore not what is true, but what is probable, what is the most probable option, and really explore it in my mind and with the information that I have. And I tend to like the space of theoretical thinking, even like quantum physics and stuff like that, and being really like grounded and so logical. I love it. I love that space. So what I like to explore with the free will is that like I don't believe it's deterministic, and it's again like, okay, I believe this in like, I don't know, 80% chance or something, wherever it is. I don't have exact points, but okay, so I believe like, okay, it's not deterministic, but also I don't believe in free will because in my worldview, there is not a way to put free wills anywhere. There are recursive like cycles and everything and feedback loops. But if you look at the bottom level of the universe, basically, for me, there is not a freeze frame of the universe when someone says, let me put some things into that. So for me, free will doesn't exist the same way as teleportation doesn't exist. And that doesn't mean that teleportation is not possible and it's never going to exist. Therefore, it's not saying that free will is not ever like possible by, I don't know what means, but in my world, there is like no way to put it in there because I didn't choose where I was born and I didn't choose my environment. And then when I felt like I'm choosing my environment, that was conditioned by the stuff before. And my brain, some states of the brain are like after each other, and right now my brain cannot transform into something that it cannot transform. I can only have states of mind that I can have, or states of brain, and neurochemical states of brain. So it's this continuous chain of events from the start of the universe up until now. But I love that there is randomness inside it because of quantum physics at the bottom level, right? It seems like it's probabilistic. And then I love the thought that it's such a complex thing, my brain and my mind, that I can still feel like I have free will and I can still use it. And with this realization, for me, it's so useful because I realize, oh wow, so I can't control everything, and my environment affects me a lot, and maybe will affect me how I'm gonna act in 10 years. So maybe what I do is I'm gonna affect my environment. So I go into the meta space where I'm affecting the conditions. And trusting my brain that it's going to make the decision that is best for me and my environment. So that's where I'm at, and I'm in very useful space. And I know that for someone it's different space. For someone this information is gonna lead to, oh, well, I'm just gonna sit here and not do anything. Well, that's just how their brain is reacting to that information. And I'm trusting my brain that it's going to react in a way it's beneficial for me, and it's going to be, I'm gonna have even more agency than before. So it's kind of paradoxical, but the human nature is a little bit paradoxical. So yeah, that's my stance kind of. But yeah, I'm totally open to every other possibility as well.
Did you enjoy sharing that?
Yes. Yeah.
Then I don't have a problem with it.
Yeah. Okay. I think one of the two last questions. Okay. So what do you think about spirituality? What it means in your life, or is it included in your life?
Yeah. What I think about spirituality, it's funny because I used to consider spirituality and religion very separate, and then now they started to come together for me in a way. So like I can't talk about the sensation of spirituality without talking about religion. And I think in a certain way, at least for my own sense making, I've recently sort of reclaimed religion as a form of spirituality. Yeah, where previously it was isolated to kind of a dogmatic space. So I will talk about religion in this way.
Mm-hmm.
To borrow the words of Nitobe Nazo, who wrote Bushido, The Way of the Samurai, The Way of Japan. Oh no, Bushido, The Soul of Japan. Sorry, who borrowed these words from Matthew Arnold. Religion is morality that is touched by emotion. I'm not a fan of that particular phrasing. I'm more a fan of the Japanese translation of it, which I then translated into Mandarin, and it's something like, it's like 宗教是 宗教是情绪中的阴影的道德, something like that.
Yeah, that sounds better.
It sounds much more poetic. But the word that it uses is like it's closer to morality in the shadow of, in the influence of, in the that follows emotion, right? There's a kind of more interpenetrative, interactive quality to it, and I'm amazed by this idea. It really gave me such a huge insight. Because the idea that we are emotionally compelled to act in moral ways gives me a lot of fucking hope. And so the religious experience is one of emotion that compels one to behave in a moral fashion. And Nitobe Nazo was making the argument that Bushido is actually a religion, not so much a set of martial values. And when we just think about to what extent human beings are compelled by emotion on a daily basis, it's like that's not a small claim to make, that's a huge claim to make. And so it also stops me from becoming just like a cold rationalist, which I think is the danger, right, that we fall into in this little corner of the internet. Yeah. So I think about spirituality. Yeah, I don't think about spirituality. I feel it.
Cool. Beautiful. Have you found meaning in life? Your meaning? Not of life, but in your life?
Yes, for most of the parts that has already happened, and not yet for the stuff that hasn't yet happened.
Wow, so for the time being, yes, but not for the unknown yet? Or
yeah. I'm not trying. I swear to God, now that you said it back to me, I feel that it's a fucking pretentious answer. No, but it's
no,
like
it's cool. I love it. I like it.
So everything that's coming by, I want to be able to imbue the things that I'm doing with meaning.
Yes.
Like a blacksmith, right?
Yeah,
it's like
yeah.
Gotta smith it into it.
And so is it I feel like I don't know if I am interpreting okay, I can't talk anymore. If I'm interpreting that correctly, is it that you feel the meaning in the stuff that you've done, that you are doing, and then you cannot be certain, or rather you want to, as you've said, implement the meaning like a blacksmith in the things that you are going to do in the future, but you cannot ever be like so sure about it, like so you stay cautious about it or something like that, or not? Or is it
the part that I'm not sure about is whether or not is what decisions I'll make. So
yes.
So an event X could happen, right? And say okay, I can go for dinner. In that dinner, I can imbue that dinner with a fuck ton of meaning. I can also choose not to do that and allow that moment to pass.
Yes.
Right. I don't know, like right now, I don't know which choice I'm going to make. See? But fortunately, I have the ability to make that choice. I can make that dinner as bloody fucking meaningful as I want. And if I do not want to do that, I can also just put this food into my body and then carry on for something else.
Yeah, does
that make sense?
It makes perfect sense, because it feels like, okay, it feels like humility, because like, yeah, you don't know what's gonna happen and how you react in the future, because you are not yourself in the future. You're gonna see how the life is going to go. And I think this is a really important part, because for me, it gets back again to the self-deception, because we talked about with my colleague Christoph. We talked about a lot about psychology of relationships and stuff like that, and there's a lot of maybe some like dark triad, for example, and some dark traits which can emerge out of a relationship. But when it's a loving relationship and people are like lovely people and they love each other, and then dark traits come up somehow because they are insecure or something, but they were like, they didn't think they could do that, but suddenly a year in a relationship they somehow act as assholes. So for me, I have the same humility. Okay, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I don't know where the universe or my life is gonna take me, and I could be an asshole in the future. And if I'm aware of that, I'm trying not to be an asshole, right? So the same way I'm trying not to be an asshole, you're trying to embed maybe the meaning in the stuff that you do. So
I'm also trying not to be an asshole.
I'm also trying to embed the meaning, right? So yeah, not to be an asshole and have meaningful life. That's cool. I love it.
And this is, but you've brought up a really good a good kind of paradox here, is that like, if one is afraid of being an asshole, one checks all of the ways that one could possibly be an asshole, and so avoids becoming an asshole and is therefore not an asshole, but then it's like constantly locked in this self-doubt of, am I an asshole? Unwilling to let go of having this question, knowing that this question is the thing that prevents one from being an asshole.
Exactly.
That's the wise man's conundrum, right? It's you know, even Socrates also knew that he was not wise, so it became a Zen koan.
Yes.
As far as I'm concerned, having more and more of these good questions is useful. And I think, like, am I an asshole seems to be one of those questions which are healthy, I think, for building a sense of character. Because at least you're aware of it, at least you're checking it. Someone who, an actual asshole, is just completely unaware of said assholism, you know. I think that's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, I think that's let's end it at the asshole. But one last thing, I want to know your plans for the future.
Actually, sorry, I have one thing to actually.
Sure. Anything.
So sorry, because I have one thing to add to your dark triad thing, which feels important, and it's that I don't think there are bad people. I think that there are just people who are fucking ill-managed. Terribly, terribly ill-managed people. And whether or not that is objectively true, again, I lean on the principle of certainty of uncertainty. I will never know because I will never meet all of these people. What I do know is that viewing somebody as, at worst, terribly ill-managed has more utility than seeing them as evil. So I hope that's something useful in the consideration of relationships.
Yes.
Now, what's coming up? Okay, so here's the plug part in it. So a couple of things are coming up. I've just opened up my own podcast. It's called Minutes to Midnight, and it's on the 5 to Midnight webpage. We are also starting a project for a Center for Wisdom Cultivation, which I talked about on the episode with John. The crowdfunding campaign will be up probably by the time this episode is up already. You can also join us on Patreon. That's I'll send you the link so you can put it down at the bottom as well. Just follow us on Instagram, 5 to Midnight in INTL, Ethan 5TMINTL. That's also there. You can find us at all of these platforms. And if you're at all interested in entering some kind of coaching relationship with me, feel free to drop me an email, and I'll be more than happy to set up a call. Let's talk and see if that works. Yeah.
Cool. Dude, thank you so much. Thank you for what you do. I'm really curious about what's gonna happen in this space in the future. I would love to come to Singapore or whenever you're based to explore the space with you, to stay and spend some time with you or something. Hopefully, maybe sometime I'm gonna come to Prague, to Czech Republic. That would be cool as well. John Vermecki is visiting Czech Republic in 20 days, and I'm so excited. So yeah, he's going for a conference here. So we're gonna talk to him, and I'm offline. I'm so excited. Yeah. I love him. So, oh my God, this felt really, really, this talk. So thank you so much. And I have to go move now. I have to express and move through this conversation actually, and integrate it a little bit into my body and stuff. So I wanna cultivate your practices, what you do, and hopefully I'm gonna try them with you guys sometime. Say hello to Tamaki as well. And maybe we'll talk all of us together in the future. And have a beautiful day. Thank you. Thank you so much.
I'm happy to come back, dude. Thank you.
Cool.
Thank you so much.